Yo, ladies and gents, I'm your host Joshua Buma, and welcome back to another episode of Masters of Their Craft. This series is built to dive a little bit deeper into what it takes to become a master of a craft. This series will eventually develop into way more than just gaming, but for today we're back in gaming and we have our first new game, Hyperdemon. For those of you that don't know what Hyperdemon is, it is a fast-paced FPS arena shooter. The goal of the game is to eliminate your demon enemies as fast as possible. The faster you do this, the higher your score on time gets. The higher your score on time gets, the more difficult the game becomes. There's no real story to the game, but I will say it mixes very tedious mechanics with its insane psychedelic visuals. I've played the game for about a year now on stream, so I can say I'm above average at the game, but today's third special guest holds the current world record for Hyperdemon. So, without further ado, let's introduce our third special guest, Mr. TANKUO. Hello, hello.
Hello.
How you doing today, bro?
It's all right.
Let's go. All right, why don't we just dive right in? Why don't we begin with you telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tankuo. It's not a real way to pronounce my name, and I've held the Hyperdemon world record for over 180 days total as a recording.
I'm talking about, baby. Okay, so when did you find Hyperdemon, and what got you hooked onto it?
I discovered it about a week after launch. I found it through a news article telling me about a game that looked really trippy, so I looked it up. And I went on and downloaded a pirated version of the game to see if I would like it, and I sure did. so,
Hell yeah.
so I bought it. I bought it the same day. I did buy it the same day. And for what got me hooked, it was just the gameplay. It was purely fun.
That's what I'm talking about. Hyperdemon is very, very much one of those games where somebody who hasn't played it will kind of just see gameplay of it and they're like, "What the hell am I looking at?" It has very, very crazy psychedelic visuals, so it is something that looks very different to anything you've seen in most games. So I think, at least for that, it definitely caught my attention. But until I actually sat down and played the game myself, I didn't realize how in depth it actually is. But yeah. Okay. How long did it take you to reach the first world record?
It was about 260 hours of gameplay in 64 days to get my first world record with a score of 398.
Sheesh. And at the for all the scores during that time, what was like the closest thing to what you had? Do you remember?
Closest to what I had. It was 395.
Damn. So were you watching? Because Hyperdemon is another one of those games that actually has a replay system built in the game, which I think is phenomenal. I think almost any video game nowadays should have something like that, not only to watch what the people you're competing against are doing, but to watch back your own stuff to see where you could improve. And it does have another feature where you can even change the speed of the replay. And I think that was fantastic because when I first was watching TANKUO'S replays, I had no idea what was going on or what he was doing. But what's cool about the game is that they also allow you to look at what that person is pressing in that moment in terms of their keyboard binds and their mouse. So trying to learn the in-depth mechanics of Hyperdemon, this was something that I think was extremely important. Did you utilize that at all on your way to the world record, or were you kind of just like figuring out the game?
I did definitely look at the runs above me to look at their strategies and steal their strategies as everyone
Yeah, for
happens.
real. I thought it was extremely impressive because the first thing I noticed was everybody who was above me on the leaderboard essentially had more hours than me. And I could tell that because of just the spawns of the enemies. These people knew the timing of and the orientations of where the enemies were spawning, and I was like, all right, bruh, I'm completely behind on this. And it is something that takes like a ton of repetition to actually get to that point where you're like, okay, I know this is spawning here, so I'm gonna move, precisely this way to get to the spawn, so you can essentially farm it before it even spawns. I think that's something that makes the game very, very cool. Okay, Hyperdemon is actually quite a small community, and having a small community for this game, do you think there's a lot of support for helping each other out?
I do think so, because I feel like to have the time and look at the Discord, it's someone being helped with some part of the game, if they're in
Yeah.
the top 2000 or top 100. So yeah.
It's amazing. And I can definitely vouch for that because Tonko was one of the first people that kind of came into my chat when I streamed the game. And immediately I was already asking him questions based on, he showed me where his score was. And I was like, all right, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to definitely try to learn as much as I possibly can from him. There were things like there are crystals in the game that you can essentially do a crystal jump through. And it kind of has like a time-lapse moment where if you aim this towards a group of enemies called scuttlers, you get a chance to basically b-hop off of all three of them because they usually spawn in threes. And this is something that I struggled with for a little while, and Tanko definitely gave me some advice and made it a lot easier for me to understand. And then once I got the hang of that, I'm pretty sure I got closer to a new PB. So I think having a smaller community for this game definitely breeds a lot of support, and even the players who hold the higher scores definitely help out with players who have lower scores, which is fantastic. I like having that small knit community like that because a lot of the games that are bigger these days kind of breed toxicity, to say the least. So it is nice to see a game like this. And most of the time, I'd like to imagine most people are just competing with themselves. Like, would you say you're somebody who you just want to break your own record rather than, beat the person above you, or are you a competitive person at heart and you don't want anyone to come near your score?
I definitely did feel more motivated to play the game when there was someone above me. That is for sure.
I think that's something that's great. Like, because even a game where it's not really like multiplayer or something like that, but you just like, you kind of get that feeling of, all right, well, this person just beat my score, but now I can do better. And you can go in their replay and just see what they're doing different, and then you can try to mix it up yourself. I think that is a beautiful thing for the game.
I also really like in earlier game when you don't care about the leaderboards because you're not very high up on it and you just try to beat yourself. And then you get that new high score and you see all these names just fly past you as you go up the leaderboard. Because just being able to beat yourself, you can beat all those people right there that you just watched fly by.
Yeah, it truly is one of those games where you can like go in and refine your runs. That's something that I realized pretty early. Like Tanko was just telling me like, he's like, don't worry if you mess up like during this part. He's like, because you're like what you're doing is pretty much you're gonna get a new PB. But like at the same time, I'm so picky now because of what I've seen other people do, and I'm like, well, I want to get my run to start like this or to develop like this. And even when it gets to like end game type of stuff, I still feel clueless in terms of what everyone else is doing. Like Tanko is somebody who, and you guys will see the gameplay in the background, but he clears the end game like in an insane amount of time, and his decision making, his precision with his movement is something that is very, very impressive. So okay, have you lost the world record before, and what drives you to get it back? We kind of already spoke towards what drives to get it back, but
yeah,
I'm curious if you ever lost it.
Yeah, I have lost it twice. The first time was back in the start of December, right after I just got the first 400 plus score. And since I just gotten the first 400, which was my main goal at the time, I stopped playing the game for 3 months. After which a player named Possum had held the world record for almost all 3 months that I didn't play, which was long enough in my opinion, so I started playing again, and about a month and a week after I beat him.
What would you say was like different from what he was doing at the time to how you figured out you were going to beat his score? Was it just purely pacing? Was it a different strategy of like killing the enemies?
I think it was more of a strategy of doing his strategy but faster, because you can always trust that the world record run is currently the fastest way to play the game.
Yeah,
usually.
That's very true. Okay, so as someone who's played the game before, and I know how creative you can get with the game mechanics, what would you say separates your runs from people who are closer to you on the leaderboards right now?
Yeah, that's a hard one since the same enemies spawn at the same times in every one. So most top runs just look the same. There's one significant difference in my run, and it's at the start. The top 10 players will do a slightly faster strat, and I will do one that's a bit slower, but the slower one also saves a big gem for later. Most top 10 players will use the first big gem to kill the first 3 scuttles with a stomp ricochet, while I don't to save it. The reason for this is actually consistency. Much later in the run, you'll get to the gold power up, and after using it, the best players will go for the strat known as early boss. And the key to this is having more gems for the recollect after gold, and by simply having a big gem which was saved at the start up during gold can get you 3 extra gems for the recollect, making early boss more consistent.
That is absolutely ridiculous. Now, is that something that you had to go in the replay, or it kind of just like clicked to you because of how many hours you have doing this? You're like, okay, this gem is what really makes the difference at the start, regardless of taking the hit of to your speed and your pacing and your timing of doing the bit slower start.
Yeah, I went through several replays of mine to see the differences of why did the early boss work in this run and not in this run, and what's the difference. And I found the difference being the gem I saved at the start being up and giving me more gems, and therefore
That's
making it
amazing.
more consistent. And yeah,
Holy. Okay, so now, being a master at this game, what do you wish the game would evolve into? And would you like more of a challenge, would you say?
I mainly just hope the game will become less luck dependent and also have more content itself. We're already brushing against the human limit. I remember someone saying if you killed every enemy, the frame it spawned, the max score you could get was around 437, and the current world record is 422. So something like a longer spawn set or more enemies might do the trick.
Yeah.
But Sorath Games, the developer, they don't like to do those things because it would require a leaderboard wipe. And that's not something they want to do.
Yeah, a lot of people would be stripped of their their current positions. I wonder if that's something that would fuel people more into play, or would they feel robbed? That's something I guess that would have to be up to debate. Little bonus question for you. So, Hyper Demon does have a predecessor in some sort of form, and that is Devil Daggers. And you guys can go look up Devil Daggers on your own if you'd like, or I can put some gameplay over. And Devil Dagger seems the goal is more to survive and kind of hold out. And it seems like the arena is smaller. I could be wrong on that. You can correct me if I am. But watching some of the replays from Devil Daggers, it just gets very, very overwhelming. Like, eventually you get to a point where there are just so many enemies on the stage. Like, the recent replay I'd watched, this person is somehow managing not to get hit whatsoever with an insane amount of enemies in this small arena. But he eventually gets to a point where he's going for so long and it gets so overwhelming where he just stops moving completely and just aims down at the floor and starts ricocheting his bullets towards all the enemies surrounding him. How do you think having an ending to a run, like in Hyper Demon, is different than Devil Dagger's strat of just holding out against the enemies?
It's the potential of going on further. Since there is an end, it's at that stop. But with even if there are so incredibly many enemies in the run, it's not just going to end. You can get a world record by 10 more seconds.
Yeah.
Which isn't possible in Hyper Demon. And the arena, it gets smaller over time, and it does get very small at the end in Devil Daggers. Actually, it also gets small in Hyper Demon, I'm pretty sure.
Really? In the end game? I guess I kind of noticed that. It's a little harder because the, like, I guess border of the arena is kind of like fogged out, so it's kind of harder to see how much room you actually have. But do you think Hyper Demon could have a mode where there is no end?
That's one of the things that's been talked about is an endless mode, which has sounded pretty nice. But yeah,
I guess we'll see what I guess we'll see what the devs want to do about that. Okay. Hyper Demon having a replay system, we've talked about this quite a bit already throughout this, allowing you to watch each other's runs. What tips of advice would you give to newer players for getting a new PB?
For completely new players, I'd say you should learn the individual enemies and how to kill them the fastest, and then slowly start stringing it all together to get a big combo. And for the knows how to play the game but still sucks, like Boomer here, I would say don't instantly restart when you mess up. Instead, try to bring it back, like stomping a snake to get 3 new rails, like I do.
Yeah.
You still have so much time to save in the rest of your run. And for the end game, you're going to see most players just standing in the edge of the arena and shooting into the middle. I know this because I did it. And this is safe, but it's also slow. So in the end game, I recommend you try to get inside and kill enemies fast. And it's best to practice that now than to get 350 with the world's worst end game.
Yeah. I think it's something that I even experienced. I would sit on the edge and just try to be, keep myself alive. I'd be out there surviving, fighting for my life, when in reality, I'd go watch like any replays from the higher scores, and everyone just kind of like dives into that middle and is just killing everything as quick and as efficiently as possible. And that's something that I think is daunting, especially for a new player, because you can understand how most of the enemies work, but when it gets overwhelming like that and you have to make decisions in split seconds like that, it gets really stressful. So at the same time, it's also a motivational thing of, you kind of have the standard of where you want to get with the higher level and higher score replays, but it's kind of, you have to get to a point where you want to implement it into your own gameplay, and you have to put the hours in to get there. These are not in-game mechanics that can just be mastered overnight. As TANKUO says, he has a lot of hours in this game, so I think it's basically the same as anything in life. You gotta put the hours in. Okay, so I know you to be a Tarkov enjoyer as well as just a real gamer who has a very wide variety of games. What do you think a game like Hyperdemon makes it special compared to anything else that you've played?
The game design. The people at Zorath have a thing for designing games really well, and every part of Hyperdemon was crafted with thought behind it. A good example, I think, is the dashing. Whenever I play a game that has a dash mechanic, I always feels like it's something that was added on top of the game after it was finished.
Yeah.
But in Hyperdemon, I feel like they crafted the enemies, the movement, the arena weapons around the dash and made a perfect balance. And Devil Daggers also has this kind of excellent game design.
It seems like Devil Daggers kind of, I would say, lacks. I don't want to say lacks is like a bad thing, but it lacks some of the movement that Hyperdemon has. So as somebody who came from Devil Daggers, was that movement like confusing to you at first, or was it something that you really were excited for and you wanted to get better at doing?
It was very fun. I barely played Devil Daggers before Hyperdemon. I did have a little dabble in it for 5 hours, but Hyperdemon was a very different game. They designed Hyperdemon to be the exact opposite of Devil Daggers, almost in a way. Two very different games.
Yeah,
they still look pretty similar. Yeah. With the hand and the flying skulls.
I think it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And then one last thing that I wanted to input with Hyperdemon being such a small community, it's very cool in terms of the community came together to try to get exposure for the game. Not only did they have a Discord that would notify anyone in the Discord if somebody was streaming the game, but every time I would stream the game, I would get quite a few people come in and just come watch, which I think is a beautiful thing. Not a lot of games have that, especially in a game like Rocket League, which is primarily what I had streamed. Getting exposure, even being discovered in that category was very difficult, especially for how long the game's been around. It's almost been a decade. And it's always been like that, even since, before free-to-play, after free-to-play. So I think Hyperdemon is a very special game, so I highly recommend you guys check it out if you haven't already. And yeah, that's going to do it for us, homies. It's time to wrap up the 3rd episode of Masters of the Craft. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and hit that sub button. More content like this on the way. Mr. TANKUO, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we close out?
No, not really.
And also, do you have any socials you would like to plug?
Just the YouTube. You can watch my runs there.
Yes, sir. I will put the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much again, and peace.